that starts with you. Turn full circle when it's due, and the flame that warms your heart burn with love and hold us when we part. As true beauty grows with time, there's no need to hide the light. As true glances reciprocate, now is the moment worth a lifetime's wait.
Hello and welcome to all of you out there. Welcome to the Dingle Literary Festival, who are kindly hosting a discussion with the esteemed author Sarah Moss. We are delighted to have Sarah here with us, and we would have loved to have had you in the audience ready with your questions and queries, but unfortunately this year that can't happen. I have tried to anticipate the kind of things you'd like to ask Sarah. So hopefully we'll get a good discussion going on writing, the writing process, and her beautiful new book, Summerwater, which Rebecca Wilcock of the Irish News described as evocative with deft touches of humour, sadness and cruelty. Summerwater perfectly encapsulates a cross-section of modern British society. A book I absolutely adored, the cover of which drew me in. I know you're not supposed to judge a book by a cover, but it's so beautiful. I just keep wanting to touch the cover of it. So for those of you who, I'm sure many of you know Sarah, and for those of you who are not so familiar, Sarah is a leading writer of her age. She's written 7 novels, starting with Cold Earth in 2009, Night Waking, Bodies of Light, Science for Lost Children, The Tidal Zone, Ghost Wall, and her latest, Summerwater. In addition to her fiction writing, she's published non-fiction books on polar exploration, chocolate, and travelling and working and living with her family in Iceland, Names for the Sea, Strangers in Iceland. But the focus of today's is that beautiful book, Summerwater, that we spoke about a moment ago. So Sarah is English, but has had a very busy year this year because new book out, pandemic, and she has emigrated to Ireland. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about that? How you came to be here?
Yes, no, it has been a strange and busy year. I'd been coming to Irish festivals for a few years, and I think really the beginning was the West Cork Festival in Bantry a few years ago, and I was doing an event with John Boyne, and we were talking about the Equal Marriage Act, and someone in the audience said something about how much Ireland had changed since her childhood, and everybody agreed. And I just was sitting on stage and thought, how wonderful to live in a country where things are getting better and where reasonable people reasonably believe that things will continue to get better. And that was the beginning of quite a long process of coming over and going back and making friends and making connections and thinking about moving. And then I think as Brexit happened and as a family, we just gave up hope really of feeling at home in England. Moving to Ireland felt more and more logical, and then the job came up at UCD and it was an opportunity and we took it.
Super, super. Well, we're lucky to have you here, which is wonderful. And your latest novel, Summerwater, is set in a holiday cabin up at the lakes in northern Scotland. And how did you come to write this novel?
It was remarkably straightforward. We went and stayed in a holiday park in Scotland. I've moved around a lot in my life. There aren't very many places that I've gone back to consistently, but I was born near the place where Summerwater is set. And my mother claims I learned to walk there, which I think is unlikely because it's extremely stony and it wouldn't be a good surface for learning to walk. But I certainly spent a lot of my infancy on those shores. And I've been back at intervals all through my life. And I'm the one who plans the holidays in our house, which means that we go where I want to go. And it's my fault if it doesn't work out. Mm. And I noticed that there were cabins at the top of the loch, which is a place where otherwise you can't stay. I mean, there were no other buildings. And I thought it might be fun to go for a week with the kids. And it wasn't terribly fun because it rained all the time. I tend to say all day, every day for 7 days, but we don't actually know because we packed up and went to stay with friends in Glasgow at the end of the 6th day. We made the best of it. You know, we climbed the mountains and we went out on the water and we did what you do, but it was raining the entire time. And I became fascinated by how the families who were staying in these cabins were all clearly watching each other. There were French windows looking out onto the lake. And of course, when the lights come on, you can see in. And with that very long Scottish summer twilight, that period where the lights are on and the curtains aren't closed is enormously extended. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure everybody was watching each other. Certainly we were watching everybody and we were making up stories about the people in the other cabins. And I thought it was so strange that nobody was talking to anybody else. There was all of this watching and probably judging and imagining going on, but no conversation. And it really started there.
Okay. Yes, that sounds like an ideal setup. All these different people and yes, definite food for the imagination there. In an interview with Adam O'Fallon Price for the Millions, you said you like to put the reader behind the narrator's eyes. And in Summerwater, we are plunged straight into the consciousness of my namesake, Justine, who is escaping the claustrophobia of the rain-soaked holiday cabin by going for a run early in the morning. How did you decide to start that point?
Well, I knew I wanted to start first thing in the morning. I had the idea for a novel that would start at dawn and end as the next dawn approached. And it was a very playful writing process. I mean, I was officially working on something quite different and much, much more serious. This was really just a little distraction project. So it wasn't very planned for the first few characters. I was really just playing around to see what would happen. And then once it began to take shape and I realized it really was a book, I sort of proper structure and took it all a bit more seriously. Yeah. But Justine was really just where I happened to begin. And of course she'd be up earliest, and I'm a dawn runner as well. So I know what it's like to start the day before anybody else with a run. And that was probably why.
I reckoned when I was reading it that you must be a morning runner, because the detail of the running and the early morning and the light and the shade and the rain, it was so evocative that I knew you just had to. It wasn't just out of your imagination. And the other characters, I mean, I've had 3 teenage sons, so I was particularly taken with the teenagers in this book. Wonderful, funny, but so real as well. Was any of it autobiographical, or have your sons read it?
The younger one has read it, though I warned him about the sex scene. The older one absolutely did not want to read anything that might involve a sex scene written by his mum, which struck me as absolutely fair enough. Yeah. No, they're not based on my kids. My literary kids are never based on mine, but I do have kids of that age around me. I mean, I have 2 teenage sons, and like you, I teach young adults, so I spend a lot of time with people in the sort of 14 to 25 age group.
Well, that was obvious as well. It was so authentic. You caught the voice so intimately of the teenage boy. I just thought it was wonderful. And then also, without giving anything away, did you know from the beginning how it would end?
No, there were two. I mean, again, without giving anything away, there were two possible ways it might end. And I wasn't sure when I was writing the first draft which way it was going to go. Though, having said that, I realised when I went back and looked at it, there were actually clues all the way through the novel.
There were.
So, on some level, I must have known, but I didn't think I knew.
I literally had a knot in my stomach the whole way through the book. I was really enjoying it, and I laughed at some of the points, but I just, as one reviewer said, I felt like there was an axe about to fall, all the time. And I wondered, did you layer that in afterwards, or is that how it actually, did it come straight from the subconscious like that?
I think some of each. It's one of those literary techniques I have to not think about too much. I hope it's there in Ghost Wall as well. Yeah. But I sometimes think about writing a novel as making music. I mean, there are all sorts of better and worse metaphors for writing novels. But particularly a polyphonic novel like this one, I'm imagining an orchestra and I'm imagining conducting. And you almost need a kind of gradually rising note in the background that nobody's quite noticing as it gets louder and louder and louder. And I think of stringed instruments. I think of, the cellos or the violins kind of sliding up. And you don't notice until it's really uncomfortable, but actually it's been there all along. So it's in that sense. And I think if I look too directly at that, the other stuff won't quite work. So I just let it happen.
That's a wonderful metaphor, because there is that rising note behind it. And it is like you are both the writer of the music, but also the conductor and the puppet master. And
playing all the instruments, actually.
Yes, yeah. It's wonderful, wonderful. Maybe at this point you'd like to read a little bit of it and give the readers a taste of one of the characters from Summerwater.
Sure. I'm reading from the beginning here. I'm reading from Justine, who is the middle-aged mother of two who gets up at dawn to go running. She left her kit ready in here last night. Yesterday's knickers. They'll be in the wash as soon as she's back. The moment of fear as she fights to get her elbows through her sports bra. One of these days, she thinks, one of these days a woman is going to die doing this, or at least dislocate her shoulder, and it'll be worse getting it off all wet. She probably doesn't need it anyway, the special tight bra, but they always say you must, however tiny your tits, or terrible things will happen. The thing about running in the rain is to wear as little as possible. Your skin's waterproof and it's layers of wet fabric that make you cold, not to mention the chafing. Capri leggings, she's not shaved her legs, no point in this weather, but any other loon out there in this rain will have better things to think about. Both hands to ease the door handle. Stop at the children's door to unravel 2 sets of breathing. Dither about whether to take the one key, leaving them locked in and needing to go through the windows in a fire. The windows being low and easy to open, and there being no plausible cause of fire just now. Or leave the key, meaning that she can't unlock the door, and there are 3 beloved souls sleeping undefended in the woods. Or at least 2 beloved souls and 1 mostly tolerated one. Fire, she thinks, is more likely than murderous nutters. You do hear of psychopaths hanging out in holiday parks, but only in America. And the good thing about being at the end of a 10-mile single-track road is that the getaway options are crap. Unless, of course, the nutter plans to hide in the woods until dark. But there's not much dark this time of year. Wouldn't the police bring dogs? Or he could swim across the loch, at least if he'd thought to bring a wetsuit. Or she. Women can probably be serial killers too. Wasn't the one in Japan? Though that was life insurance fraud more than sadism, not that it makes much difference to the victims. Though a fraudster probably kills you faster than a sadist, so maybe it does. You'd need to get into the wetsuit before embarking on your murderous games. Not something you want to be doing between committing a crime and leaving the scene. Even worse than putting on a sports bra. Jesus, look at that rain. There's almost no point putting clothes on for that. If she'd brought her swimming costume, she'd wear it. One thing, it can't keep up like that all day. There can't be that much water up there. She sits on the veranda to fasten her shoes, to adjust her armband and choose her music. She should probably run mindfully here, listening to the wind in the trees and the lapping of the loch, and any birds deranged enough to attempt flight in the deluge. But fuck that, she needs music for her feet, music to connect her feet to the ground so she doesn't have to think about it. It's not, she sees, even 5:30 yet. She can have 2 hours if she wants them, get in a quick 20k. Though if she does that, she'll be eating all day and the kids wanting a snack every time they see her. but she knows she's going to do it anyway. She's got 4 peanut protein bars tucked into her packet of sanitary towels in the suitcase, the only place no one else is likely to look. And she's not too proud to eat them in the bathroom if she has to.
Wonderful, wonderful. I can relate to so much of that, even though I'm not a runner. But it's, you know, when you wake up first thing in the morning and all the different thoughts that go through your head, and you've managed that kind of interior dialogue so well. Was that something that you had worked on before, or was this a new kind of process for you?
I think it's a bit different. I've done a bit of it before in the tidal zone, where the narrator Adam is quite anxious and kind of hyper alert. But this is a bit different, and of course there are more voices.
Yes,
and they've got less to worry about, really.
Yes, and again, there are so many layers to the detail that are in that scene, and I recommend a second reading of the book. I went straight back to read it again and kind of get underneath the first layer. And in both Ghostwall and Summerwater, disillusionment with Brexit surfaces, and it's a very potent theme at the moment, and I wonder, do you find that it is heavily influences your writing?
I hope they're not just Brexit books, and I think the fact that they're doing quite nicely in translation suggests not. It would be great if Brexit were just a local or even just a regional problem, but I think we're doing this on the day of, we hope the American election results are going to be announced. Yes. Right-wing populism and nationalism are clearly global problems. And as someone who writes a lot about place and belonging, I'm very interested in how we can think about place and the places we love and the places we belong to, and maybe the places we think we own, in ways that are not exclusive or oppressive. So I'd see that really as a thing that both of these books are interested in. Can you love a place without wanting to keep other people out of it? Can you feel a sense of belonging without needing to claim ownership? How welcoming can you be in a place that you really like?
These are such important questions, and I think Summerwater addresses that, and not in a preachy, but in a very integral way in the novel. And I think it's very much a novel of our time, and very important to read right now. The other thing that struck me about Summerwater was how you incorporate your descriptions of nature and the environment throughout the novel. And I wonder, would you talk a little bit about that?
So between each chapter, there's a page or two of writing which is trying to see the place and experience the weather and the passage of time through animal or sometimes geological beings. And that was partly, I suppose I would see it really as a book about a place over 24 hours. And of course, it's mostly about the people, because writing is mostly about people. But I was interested in the other stories that are happening in that place at the same time, and in the literary challenge of trying to write about them. And I think writing not just animals, but weather or trees or rocks or water is easy to anthropomorphize. And I think as soon as you start using the first person for anything that's not human, you're really into that problem. And you can't go on for very long, because the plots of trees are very slow and rather uneventful. But I think you can do it a bit. It's interesting to do it a bit, and just to keep kind of tugging the rug under the reader's feet, reminding us that there are other ways of seeing this place, there are other beings in this place, there are other processes, there are other heartbeats and other thoughts and other sleeps. So I just kept wanting to do that. And
I really enjoyed that, and it didn't hinder the progress or the pace or anything of the novel. It was such an integral part of the setting, and because, as you said, the other sections are in the first person, it allowed a more cinematic view of the place. And again, I think for these times, I think it's important to highlight the environmental aspect of our world, and that's very appealing in this beautiful book. And also the other thing that I noticed between both Ghostwall and Summerwater was that they're both quite slim volumes. And from a writing point of view, I wondered, were they originally longer and you cut your darlings, or did they come out just as they were? Did you birth them as they are?
They didn't come out as they were. I always write fast and edit slowly. So there were more drafts than I could possibly count between the first thing that I write and what actually appears in print. But the lengths were pretty stable, I think. As I rewrote and redrafted, it would go up a bit and come down a bit, but it always settled in about the same place. I think that's just the length these books are. It was the shape that they took.
How long did it take you to do your first draft of Summerwater?
I don't really know, but maybe 2 or 3 months. I mean, my first drafts are always fast, but they're also not very good. So there's most of the work for me is between finishing the first draft and finishing the last draft. It's easy to write a first draft quickly.
Yeah.
It's much harder to write something that's as good as it can be, and it takes a lot longer.
Yes. And are you working on something at the moment, a distraction like these last 2 novels were, or something else?
Mostly I'm working on the absurd project of trying to buy a house in Dublin. There's another. Yeah, it's completely life consuming. I think there's another book forming. I wrote half of one in the first lockdown, and then I don't know, I might go back to it, but I more or less lost interest. I wasn't sure while I was writing it if it was just what I needed to do to get me through lockdown or if it was actually the next book. I think it's not the next book, it may be a subsequent book, but I've got another idea. I just need to wait until term is over and we've bought a house and all of that stuff.
Maybe you'll soak up some of the landscape and environment over here, and it might feature at some stage.
I'm sure it will, and it's actually very confusing with the one I'm thinking about at the moment, because I sort of want to set it in the Peak District, which is where my parents live and where I've spent a lot of time, but it keeps going a bit Wicklow shaped.
Lovely. I wonder, would this be a moment where you might pick another piece for the readers to listen to?
Sure, of course.
The listeners to hear.
This is also from relatively near the beginning. This is the second character we meet, David, who is a retired GP who owns one of the cabins. Some of the people staying in this holiday park are renting and some are owners, and he's an owner. And he and his wife, Mary, are beginning to realise that it's not as much fun for them staying in the holiday park as it was. He's driving her over to the next valley so they can have a walk and a coffee in a cafe. Remember when you could have coffee in cafes? He takes the road fast. Well, he's been driving it 30 years, hasn't he? Knows it the way he knows human anatomy. Mary reaches for the handle above the window and hangs on, inhales as if to speak, but says nothing. He changes gear, wonders what will be the last knowledge to leave him. Will his neural pathways forget their own directions before he loses their map? Will the city that's been home all his life swirl and blur while he still holds all his medical school mnemonics? Will he remember his mother's long-buried face when he can no longer name the Prime Minister? He's still capable of learning, of course. Keeps up with the BMJ, and he's going to sign up for those Italian lessons this autumn. Might even go to Italy next summer, if they do sell the cabin. Might as well. Hike the vineyards. Mary could look at art. Oops, bicycle. Rather him than me in this weather. David, for goodness sake, says Mary, you nearly hit that poor lad. Will you slow down for the love of God? He accelerates into the next bend, feels the back wheels slide just fractionally as he and she tilt inwards. That's what ABS is for, isn't it? And all the other acronyms for which he paid so much. You couldn't throw this car off the road if you tried. If you won't slow down, she said, you can just pull over right here and let me out. I'll walk back. She won't. It's not us I'm worried about, she says. There'll be joggers and kids on bikes and all sorts. It won't do. I won't have it. All right, he says, calm down. He can hear Melissa at the back of his mind, bossy undergraduate Melissa, who knew everything and had discovered in her first year of French and sociology how everyone ought to behave under all circumstances. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. They've forgotten, that generation, who gave them equal opportunities legislation, who made space for women in medicine, who treated black and white patients, rich and poor, just the same for the first time ever, who gave women contraception and arranged abortions the first day they were legal. There are worse things, sunshine, than being told to calm down when you're getting into a tizzy. The windscreen wipers, which detect the density of the rainfall and set themselves accordingly, slow their beat. He indicates, takes the switchback turn for the hairpin bends up the hill. A fine, smooth EU-funded miracle of engineering that sees maybe 24 cars a day off season. How could the English be so stupid, he thinks again pointlessly. How could they not see the ring of yellow stars on every new road and hospital and upgraded railway and city centre regeneration of the last 30 years? They're in plenty of time for the first ferry of the day, and not many cars in the potholed car park. This water is choppier than theirs, ruffled by a wilder wind, and the valley's cloud is higher, though of course still raining. Rings spread in the puddles, and he has to pass a few parking spaces to find one where Mary won't worry about getting her feet wet. He wonders where the weather would have changed if they'd walked over, if they'd been out in it, if he'd been feeling the rain against his face and enjoying the protection of his good waterproofs. Well, he'll get out a bit while she's in the cafe. He'll go along the shore where the kids once competed to build the tallest piles of stones and dared each other deeper into unnaturally cold water.
Wonderful. I love the intergenerational nature of the book as well, where it goes from the littleies right up to the retirees, and also how rounded the characters are, because they all have their own flaws. They all have things that appeal and things that don't appeal to the reader. Do you think that's important for aspiring writers to consider when they're creating their characters?
Yes, and I particularly, there was so much kind of intergenerational warfare being, I think, quite artificially produced while I was writing this book. I mean, my kids still say, okay, boomer, whenever anybody over the age of about 18 says anything they don't like. And there was this story that Brexit was something being perpetrated by the old on the young, which might have been very broadly true, but at no individual level that we knew was it true. And I suppose this has been exacerbated with the pandemic, this sense that the young are being sacrificed for the old, or that the young are being irresponsible and ruining everybody else's lives. And I think none of that general conflict is ever useful, but that one seemed particularly toxic. So it was quite interesting to write across generations.
Yeah, very interesting. And turning to the teaching in UCD, as a colleague, I'm curious how you find the students here at UCD.
They're great. I'm really enjoying both classes. I'm teaching a third year advanced fiction workshop and an MA module called Writing Places, which is a different version of one I've been teaching for a while. It's fun. They're really good. I really wish we could teach in person. I know. Yeah.
An American colleague who taught in UCD one time was struck by how different it was in Ireland because there was no threat of shooters. That really shocked me when she said that. Really shocked me. I had never considered that might be an option. And she also said that she found the Irish students very, very compliant and very, very pleasant and non-confrontational, but also very creative and willing to take risks.
Yes, I think probably the British and the Irish experiences are more similar than the American and the Irish, or the American and the British. I mean, you don't really have to worry about shooting on British campuses either.
I don't.
Yeah.
And so your next project will have to wait till things calm down a little with your life, settling into life here in Dublin.
I think so. I am thinking about it. I suspect once I start writing, then everything else will move out of the way to make space, because that's usually what happens. But so, yeah, it's been a very full-on few months with the move.
Do you have a daily writing practice when you are engaged in a particular project?
If I'm my life kind of moves through reading phases and writing phases, and I don't write. I mean, if I'm not in a writing phase, I don't write every day. I don't know. I think it's all right not to write. I think it's absolutely fine for writers to read instead. I do read every day, a lot. And I was thinking about it the other day. I don't think I've had a day of my life since I was 5 when I haven't read fiction. I mean, even when I was giving birth and moving house and emigrating, there's always been time to read a bit, and usually quite a lot. If I'm in a writing phase...
Sorry. If you're in a writing phase?
I write, whenever I can, really. If I've got more than an hour, I write. And if I've got less than an hour, I do something that might otherwise stop me writing another time.
Yeah, good. I always love to look at other people's bookshelves. And I wonder, seeing as you're such an avid reader, what have you read recently that has really resonated with you?
I'm just craning to see the pile by the bed, because that's where I am.
Yeah.
This year, I really like. There's a Hawaiian novel called Sharks. Oh, I forgot what it's called. That's really annoying. No, I've gone completely blank on that. We'll have to edit that bit. I'm thinking what else I've been reading. I've just read a book by Gwen Moffat. She's a 1950s writer called Space Below My Feet. It's a memoir about mountaineering and rock climbing. But she was doing all of this in the aftermath of World War II in the early 1950s, and she trained as an alpine guide.
Wow.
And I like it partly because of the mountain writing, but also this kind of resolute unconventionality that's really fun. I'm reading a proof of Fiona Mosley's new book, Hot Stew, at the moment, which I'm enjoying a lot.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I think we'll draw our discussion to an end there. It's been wonderful to hear about, let me just show our listeners this beautiful, beautiful book again, back and front. And I'd like to let you all know that this can be purchased online. Kenny's.ie, Kenny's Bookshop are taking orders, and from my point of view, it's such a good read, so well written that you will, like me, want to go back and read it a second time. And Sarah, it's been wonderful to get an insight into how this book and your other books came about and the influences on you. And I wish you very well in the next writing project and in finding a home here in Dublin. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank the Dingle Literary Festival for having you here. And I'd like to thank our listeners and encourage them to dip into the other wonderful delights that Dingle Literary Festival is offering. The next event is with Kathy Kelly in conversation with Michelle Dunn, and that is at 6:30, and you can click on the link and listen in there. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for attending this very interesting discussion, and good evening to you all.